Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the broadcast of Time for Hemp all around the world at timeforhemp.com, on iHeartRadio, Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and everywhere else on the internet. People like to get together with their favorite buds and take Time for Hemp. Every Monday, we like to do Healthy Mondays here at Time for Hemp with our joint host, Lynn, Mathre, and Byrne. And don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their pipes, their vaporizers, and take Time for Hemp. Lynn and Al, thank you for being on the broadcast. I know we've got a joint friend on the show as well, who's been on the show a lot, member of our family, Paul Armantano.
Well, thanks, Casper, for having us on. So I'd love people to look for Patients Out of Time at www.medical-cannabis.com. And yeah, today we've got Paul Armantano on with us from Normal. And one of the things that Paul's done a lot of research on is looking at the impairment for cannabis, the potential of impairment, and is that a threat to society? Is that a threat on our roads, in the workplace, etc.? As we all know, Colorado launched its sales for recreational or social adult use of cannabis. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there was some little news clip that came out. Paul, you can probably tell me where it was, but some little hoax thinking about something about 37 dead from marijuana overdoses now that it started on Colorado. Kind of a little idea of, let's scare everyone. Here comes the reefer madness. It's legal and America's going to go to hell. But anyway, I want to bring on Paul and just kind of catch us up a little bit, Paul, as far as where you are, what's going on, and then we can get into some impairment issues.
Sure. Well, thank you, Lynn and Al and Casper, for having me on. And this year certainly started off with a bang already. This has been a banner year for marijuana law reform, as I'm sure anyone listening to the broadcast knows. There has been a media firestorm. While we're on this show today, tens of thousands of people will likely purchase marijuana, but in the state of Colorado, those transactions will be legal. They will take place in a regulated market, and the state of Colorado is going to get a percentage of the profits from those transactions, and that really is a brand new day.
Yeah. Sure is.
Your help with us has been quite lengthy and quite intense in that I've not seen, frankly, a writer of technical cannabis science better than you. And I would like you at some point to tell the listeners how they can read some of your work. I'm sure you have that capacity, but let's just tell the folks right now about impairment. As Lynn stated, right away, reefer madness has started. And what we want to do is put out information that is accurate and real, not scare tactics and stuff. So I think just to keep everybody calm down that might be having problems with this, how about going into your history of study on this issue and what you found out after looking at it all?
Well, I think this is an important issue we're going to have to talk about, because I really do think that we are sort of at the beginning of the end of prohibition as a legal policy. And as prohibition or criminalization of marijuana begins to morph into a regulatory system, there is going to be less focus on sort of the rhetoric surrounding marijuana is bad to this notion of, okay, how do we regulate marijuana in a civil society, and how do we address the idea that cannabis is in fact a temporarily mood-impairing or mind-altering substance? And just like we understand that we have alcohol that is legal, but we have to have regulations and rules regarding set and setting, who can use the substance, where they can use it, it's very likely that we as a society are going to confront many of those same issues and have to hash out very similar details and regulations regarding cannabis. And my concern as we approach this issue is that we don't have a public policy response regarding cannabis and potential impairment that is disproportionate to the behavioral effects of cannabis. And that's why I think it is important for us, particularly as reformers, to not deny that there can be impairment-related issues associated with cannabis, but to acknowledge that if we have a sound public policy to address those, it can't be a disproportionate public policy. Like, for instance, many of the what are known as zero tolerance per se policies we are seeing emerge in several states regarding risks surrounding marijuana and driving, or like the typical urinalysis drug testing policies that we see that are fairly common in the workplace that actually don't address the issue of present impairment, but literally are simply provide information on whether or not a person at some unspecified past point in time may have come in contact with cannabis. So that's why I think this is a very important conversation to have, because lawmakers and regulators are going to be the ones who begin tackling this regulatory issue, and they need to have sound information in order to come up with sound public policy.
I agree with you, Paul. I think that social policy is horrible in this country. It's been built on a foundation of no knowledge, and I'm worried, as you are, about proportionality, and I'm also worried about the foundation that these laws and regulations will be built on, in that all the states have laws on cannabis's use as medicine, if they have a law, that's been made up by cops and attorneys, and I can see already with the way some of these states are handling. We're not going to allow you to use cannabis or have cannabis in your system and drive a car and all that stuff. We're going down that same road built on ignorance. So it's what you do and what we say here, I think, is very important, because we've got to get law enforcement and attorneys out of the medical business. We somehow have to get medical doctors and nurses in charge of this issue, and right now that's far from anywhere near reality.
And I think the one thing you said, Paul, just to begin with, that whole the zero tolerance, the idea that if you're positive for metabolites, cannabis metabolites in your urine, you're impaired, and it's not like a blood alcohol test, which, years and years of studies, there's something to it about impairment depending on the level, whereas what you got here with cannabis is, okay, you've used it sometime in the past. That's first issue to discuss.
Yeah, it's really difficult, because for many people, their point of reference when it comes to drug-induced impairment is alcohol. And cannabis does not manifest itself, its impairment, or its pharmacokinetics, what happens to cannabis after it's ingested, is very different than what happens with alcohol. But because so many people, including policymakers, solely have alcohol as a reference, they seem to believe that they can take rules and regulations as they regards to alcohol and just apply them also to cannabis. And the reality is that really isn't the case at all. Just as we couldn't take the same rules and regulations for alcohol and apply them to, say, benzodiazepines, because they are a very different class of substances, marijuana or cannabis is its own substance. And it is very unique in the way it affects the individual, and it is very unique in the way that the body processes cannabis. It does it in a very different manner than alcohol, and many of the sort of rules and understandings that we have for alcohol do not necessarily apply to cannabis. And that's really the first point that we need to stress, that these are two very different substances, and they behave very differently.
Then we got another problem. And that problem is the education of healthcare professionals in the United States, around the world for that matter. But for those that might be joining this show and haven't heard us talk on this issue for the last 6 months or so, there are 157 medical schools in the United States. We have knowledge of the endocannabinoid system for at least 20 years, and yet not one medical school in the United States teaches any course at all to anybody about cannabis use as medicine or the endocannabinoid system. And when you've got this complete lack of responsibility in the medical community, again, I'm with you. I just think the whole deal is headed the wrong way, and it's built upon the same. It will be built upon the same ignorance that we're discussing. And I like your analogy that all these people have to judge on basically is use of alcohol, which is not the judgment call that we need.
No, you're right, Al. And you bring up a really good point about the medical community in this. Can you imagine if medical schools weren't teaching about, say, the opiate receptors? Even though we know that that is a receptor system that is far more localized than the endogenous cannabinoid system. One thing that always struck me, and it was something that came up at one of your conferences, I believe it was the last conference in Tucson. Mark Ware was speaking from Canada, and he was talking about a CME presentation that he and others had put on at some previous point in time, and they asked the audience, which was largely comprised of medical professionals, what kind of information they wanted to learn at this conference about cannabis. And there were about 6 or 7 different topics they could choose from. And much to my surprise, the topic that the least amount of medical professionals cared to learn about was mechanism of action. They wanted to learn about cannabis, but they weren't interested in learning about how cannabis interacted with the human body. I found that shocking. I would think that would be the number one thing physicians would want to know when they're talking to patients, when they're dealing with patients that are ingesting this substance. And I think that's where a lot of the lack of understanding comes from, because even the medical community, even those that are interested in learning about cannabis, don't seem particularly interested in learning about how cannabis interacts with the human body. And that's the fundamental question that we need to understand. And from our understanding of that question, we will then have sound scientific public policy.
Yes, and let's come back to that, Paul. Casper has to take a break here and introduce our advertisers and supporters. So let's do that, Casper, and we'll come back, Paul, and talk about that issue as a beginning conversation in a few minutes.
Well, let's have a bowl, good green reaper, big fat don't be much sweeter. Mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Fire it up right now.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
Indigrow is your source for affordable induction grow lighting. First discovered in 1891 by Nikola Tesla, Indigrow lights deliver 11 years of electronic sunlight to your plants. Indigrow lamps require less than half the power of traditional HID lamps. Converting to Indigrow lights means you'll cut down on your power bill with less lighting. Indigrow lamps also use 5 times less mercury than traditional fluorescent or HID lamps, making Indigrow not only energy efficient but environmentally friendly as well. No more switching out lamps between vegetative and flowering stages. As nature intended, your lights get a steady dose of UV light. That makes your plants grow healthier and stronger. Indigrow products are manufactured in San Diego, California, and come with a written 10-year warranty. What Tesla knew, then growers know now, is that Indigrow lighting is the cost-effective addition to your victory garden. To learn more or order now, go to inda-grow.com. That's INDA-GRO.com, or call 877-452-2244 to answer any of your questions. These guys really know lights. Indigrow really is your sunlight in a box.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Have you visited TimeForHemp.com? We're doing something special you'll love to see. We're presenting a live stream of multiple cannabis gardens around the clock in high definition. Come see it now. Lots of people talk about growing cannabis. We do it. Join our growing audience to get inspired by our crops to learn how to cultivate yours. Because at Time for Hemp, we plant seeds of wisdom so we can harvest buds of truth.
At Crop King Seeds, we sell the finest marijuana seeds in the world, including White Widow, Blueberry, Purple Kush, Haze Extreme, and so many more. Our seeds are available for direct order with speedy shipping. Crop King Seeds are also sold in over 100 locations worldwide.
Excuse me, I'm looking to buy some Crop King seeds.
Look no further, my friend.
Wow, they're here and in so many strains.
Buy your seeds now, in-store or online at CropKingSeeds.com.
Short plant, what them call it, ganja. Ask Babylon this. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack a kill we boys and girls. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? No do no wrong, say it now do no earth. Me wake up before me go asleep. Who a fight with ganja, them must get defeat. Jibba give me the purple skank, you know say that's sweet. Smoke it and be wise, we not done no free. Them a question Babylon can't answer. Why them a lock me brother just be a flip on ganja? We don't need them things, so we don't need them sponsor. Yo, fire upon all in farmer. With them crack and coke, me know say them can't go further. Push niggle in on them vein before them a commit murder. So why Babylon walk on fight against Rasta? Aye, them can't judge a book by the cover. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack a kill we boys and girls. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? No do no wrong, say it now do no earth. Impossible to think say that this plant that is a killer. Me stay away from chemical things, me smoke this and similar. Illegal is the thing that you can do alone. We tell the youth to choose stay away from Babylon and from rum. Planters say them build against some weed. While coke and weapon rum back them bling bling. We tell them say feel live a pride. Just be love and no fight. Keep Smoke it in the train and in the private plane. A plant and no powder, but them still a complain. Just on a go play them game. Well, hear me now. Them better cool and relax. Them don't want the ghetto youth fi grow them locks. Them can't chat. Them can't compound with spot. Show me ye the boy ya go chat for man back. Them a idiot. Them pray fi see we drop, but Jaja give we the strength, so we no matter about that. We not flap, smoke it, no bother stamp. Forward we moving, we not go step back. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack a kill we boys and girls. Why them a fight the earth? When the crack and the coke destroy the world. Why them a fight the earth? No do no wrong, say it not do no hurt.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network at Time for Hemp, and I want to thank you for tuning in. You were listening to Francisca do the song called The Herb, and today is Healthy Mondays, and we have Lynn Mathre and Al Byrne as our joint host, and we have as our joint guest today, Paul Armantano, and anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, know that 2.5 million people all around the world are packing their bongs, their pipes, their vaporizers, and taking Time for Hemp. Paul, before we get a little farther down the road, you are a historian of the movement. So let me ask you, I've had a handful of people tell me that what we are doing now at Time for Hemp is historic. iHeartRadio picked up my little radio show and took it to mainstream. iHeart, I don't know if you know about it, is found now in cars and homes and on most radio stations, in most radios you can download it into. And it really is now mainstream. And we have put together a network of people from various countries like Canada and Australia, and an amazing group of activists like Judge James Gray and two-time Emmy winner Ben Swan, and of course Chris Conrad, Mary Lynn, and myself. So, are we, Paul? Is what's happening here something brand new, something historic, something revolutionary?
I definitely think that what is happening right now on almost a day-to-day basis in regards to cannabis law reform is in fact historic. The level of support we see in the polls, the level of legislative interest in this issue, the cultural affectations. Just this morning, I saw an ad for Spirit Airlines, and they were using a double entendre regarding Colorado legalizing marijuana as part of their new marketing campaign. These sort of things are fairly unprecedented, at least over the last 2 or 3 decades. And I think we're going to see all of this continue because, as you said, this is a mainstream issue. And it's now for one of the first times in the modern era being treated as.
Yeah, but okay, Paul, let's go back to where we left the conversation before we pat ourselves too much on the back, because I believe, Mary Lynn believes, and you believe that the medical community has no real either incentive or idea about really understanding the mechanisms of cannabis on not only the human body, but every other living creature on Earth. I mean, that's one thing. If we were just talking about humans, I guess we could somehow make an excuse for human doctors not giving a damn about that. But when every creature on Earth has an endocannabinoid system, and I'm supposed to be a medical doctor, I'd feel like a fool if I didn't know about as much as you and I and Mary Lynn do. How have you had any experience? I know you have with trying to teach some of these doctors about the mechanism of cannabis.
Yeah, it's shocking when you think about it. We have, from my understanding, a denser number or more endogenous cannabinoid receptors than we have any other type of receptor in our bodies. And that's because this system is a regulatory system. The purpose of this system is to maintain a level of physiological homeostasis or a state of balance. So things like our mood and our appetite and our blood pressure and our response to pain and our immune response are all regulated by this system. So we're not talking about some ancillary, obscure physiological system here. We're talking about a system that is fundamental to maintaining proper human health. And for physicians who, as a profession, are in the business of monitoring individuals, their patients' good health, for them not to have this knowledge and not to be curious, not to want to learn more, I think is really doing the patient community a disservice. And as I told you and Mary Lynn off air, I have had the opportunity in recent months to go in and lecture to a number of different types of physicians and nurses at different very large HMOs within California. And their level of ignorance in regards to cannabis and how it interacts with their patients was truly astounding, particularly when one realizes that these are medical professionals in the state of California, where medical marijuana has been legal under state law since 1996. So we have almost 2 generations worth of patients who have been using this substance and theoretically should have been monitored by their primary care physician regarding their use of this substance, yet it is clear that most primary care physicians, even in this state, have so little understanding of cannabis that they don't even feel comfortable having the discussion with their patients because they recognize that their patients know more about cannabis than they do. But that's simply because they, as an institution, have been unwilling to learn about it.
Yeah, it's shameful. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, wait a minute. What about your nurse?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, talking during break, I was teaching a nursing course in California for nurses, introducing them to the endocannabinoid system.
Berkeley, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, of all places, Berkeley. And approaching the Kaiser Permanente hospital system to try to have them encourage going to their continuing ed department saying, hey, we're going to offer this course. I think it'd be really right up the alley for your nurses. No response. In fact, pretty much a shut door, kept sending me to other places. And then 2 nurses who did happen to come to the conference and talk to me and say literally they were told by their administrator not to discuss cannabis with patients, even though patients might be using it, even though it wasn't really encouraged for physicians to recommend it at Kaiser, but some physicians were recommending it. And again, this is the oncology unit, that they're not supposed to talk to their patients about it. And that's a fundamental, role of nursing is patient education on safe use of their medications.
Well, that's a fundamental role of freedom. Nobody's going to tell me what the hell to say and not say in any kind of work environment if what they're telling me is ridiculous. I spent 24 years in the military, and even in the military, I say even, they're as strict as it goes in the world, gang, but in the military, if you're given an order, and that order is stupid, if that order is, quote, illegal, you don't follow it. You don't follow it. And so for an administrator in a hospital to tell a medical professional they can't even talk about a medical item, the only person that should be gone out of that hospital is that administrator.
Yeah, from my point of view, primary care physicians have an obligation. They are duty-bound to look out for the health and well-being of their patient clientele. And if they know that clientele is engaging in a certain behavior that can impact their health, whether it be positively or negatively, one would think they would have an obligation and a desire to converse with their patient about that behavior and to learn as much as they could about that behavior so they could make sound recommendations to their patients. And that simply isn't happening, even in states like California.
Well, they're breaking their oath.
Yeah.
I mean, the oath of a doctor is something, I'm not going to quote it, but it's something like, it very, very famously, parts of it is quoted, it says, do no harm. Well, I mean, I guess they could take the opportunity and say, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm probably not harming anybody. But that's really not a medically sound judgment criteria. So, I just look at the whole bunch of them, from the leadership down to the practicing physician, as just not professional.
Well, I think the other big thing, physicians for a lot of years, they shy away from any kind of addiction problem. They ignore the alcoholic, they treat the injury, they treat the cirrhosis, they treat the pancreatitis, and they ignore the alcohol. There's been a big movement over years and making a lot of progress about how important what we call brief interventions are. Where a physician or a nurse or some healthcare provider actually says to the patient, hey, drinking that fifth of liquor a day is really not good for you, and blah, blah, blah. You need to cut down to a safe amount or quit. Something. But they understand that, and they're okay with recognizing that social drinking, not a big deal. But then it's like, because marijuana is prohibited, don't even want to know about it to the extent that they can give that information. If you don't know anything about it, how can you tell a patient if he's misusing it? They want to say somebody's misusing it when it's been controlling their seizures for the past 10 years and nobody else has been able to control their seizures. How can you assume that's misuse? It's a crazy world, and I don't know what it is. I know a lot of it is, I think a lot of it is fear of the DEA, fear of the government, somebody coming and looking over their shoulder at what prescriptions they're writing, and to them, cannabis is this huge red flag. But do no harm. Get over it, Doc.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think they're going to get over it unless patients start to demand of their HMOs or their individual physicians that they get treatment from a healthcare professional in regards to cannabis therapeutic use that actually knows what they're talking about. Wouldn't that be different?
And one go-home message I think listeners can take away from this is that they ought to feel somewhat empowered, because if they wish to engage in these discussions with their primary care physician, chances are they know a whole hell of a lot more about cannabis than does that physician. And even though it may seem counterintuitive, the reality is that in this regard, the patient has the opportunity to educate the physician, and they should feel empowered to do that. And if the physician isn't interested in listening to what the patient has to say, then that patient may want to consider finding a new primary care physician.
Well, I got to jump in here and interrupt.
Yeah. Say that Casper needs to take a break time here, Paul. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back for a final 10 minutes or so in a few minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, and do pay attention to what our sponsors have to say, and make it a point to click on their banners on our website and go to their website and let them know that they are heard about lots and lots of times here on Time for Hemp.
Well, I once had a bow, good green reaver, big fat don't be much sweeter. Hide it, don't hide it. Hide it, don't hide it. Just hide it, don't hide it. Hide it, don't hide it. Well, hide it, don't hide it. Fire it up right now.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.
THC Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
At Crop King Seeds, we sell the finest marijuana seeds in the world. Grown organically with original genetics, every seed is cultivated for large yields, high THC content, and measured for both CBD and CBN levels. Did we mention we sell more than 20 of the world's best marijuana strains in feminized, auto-flowering, medical, and regular varieties, including White Widow, Blueberry, Purple Kush, Haze Extreme, and so many more. Through our website and friendly call support team, our seeds are available for direct order with speedy worldwide shipping. Crop King Seeds are also sold in over 100 locations worldwide.
Excuse me, I'm looking to buy some Crop King seeds.
Look no further, my friend.
Wow, they're here and in so many strains.
Buy your seeds now, in-store or online at CropKingSeeds.com. Or call us toll-free at 1-844-CROP-KING. That's 1-844-276-7546.
Silence no work no more. Where are the leaders that guided us before? Who is going to open the door? Without them it seems like our future is not secure. Evil wins when good men sit still. Action is what we need, yeah. Rise up again, freedom fighters. Where are the freedom fighters? Moral leaders, where have you all gone? Need some heroes. Where are all our heroes? Freedom fighters, where have you all gone? Youth get led astray by the teachings of today. Can't find a way, Malcolm X teaching gone to waste. That's the price we pay when we idle every day. We need to set a better way for the youth. Wisdom is knowledge and knowledge is true wealth. Start help the youth and stop thinking about yourself. Evil wins when the righteous stand still. Action is what we need. Rise, freedom fighters. Where are the freedom fighters? Moral leaders. Where have you all gone? All you heroes. Where are all our heroes? Freedom fighters. Where have you all gone? Silence no word no more. Where are the leaders that guided us before? Who is going to open the door? Without them it seems like our future is not secure. Evil wins when good men sit still. Action is what we need. Rise up again. Freedom fighters. Where are the freedom fighters? Moral leaders. Where have you all gone? All you heroes. Where are all our heroes?
Sometimes you just need to take time to watch the grass grow. That's why the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network is growing multiple cannabis gardens for you to enjoy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, streaming live in high definition. Watch our gardens to learn how to grow yours. Visit timeforhemp.com right now. The Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network, where we don't just talk about growing cannabis, we do it.
How would you like to have all the best cannabis info all in one place? Canafo.com is the Google, Facebook, and Craigslist of cannabis. It even has its own social media platform. Canafo.com puts the world of medicinal and recreational cannabis in one place for consumers, businesses, and growers. Canafo.com is a free service where you can find over 9,000 different strains of cannabis, shop cannabis classifieds, and much more. Canafo.com is the world's most comprehensive source for all things cannabis. Get in the know with Canafo.
Consciousness, that's what we talk about here. You know, recreational use, medical use, any use needs to be responsible use. I'll pick up a prescription at my pharmacy for some kind of headache or a swollen ankle, and on the side it will say, do not operate heavy equipment or drive under this medication until you know how it affects you or whatever. You know, there's a reason why it does that, and that's true with marijuana, whether it be medical or recreational. Some people have been smoking it for years, and quite honestly, they not only can they get into a car and drive, they can get into a car and drive better. In fact, there are studies that show that people who are under the influence of marijuana oftentimes do drive better. But you don't know that until you learn how it affects you first. So please, be responsible when you utilize this medication. It is Healthy Mondays here on the Big Broadcast. I'm Casper Leitch. Big thank you to KDK Distributors for the grants they give us to keep us loud, proud, and strong. And I want to remind people that tomorrow is Canadian Tuesday. Kelly Kristen will be our joint host, and we'll be putting a spotlight on all the hardworking people up in Canada. My joint host today, Mary Lynn and Al, are having a great joint conversation with one of our joint friends, Paul Armantano. I'm going to hush myself up and enjoy some medical marijuana and just let you guys get back to your joint chat here on Time for Hemp.
Thank you, Casper, and thank you for having us again today. And I'd just like to remind the listeners that we'll be here every Monday with Casper on Time for Help at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I said Time for Help. It's Time for Hemp, isn't it, huh? Now, Paul, we need to go to the essence of this show, which is impairment. You've done the research. Let's stay with science and research here. If I use cannabis, am I impaired?
It depends what the activity is going to be. And typically when people try to measure cannabis and impairment, after a person uses cannabis, they will then try to run through a battery of different performance and cognitive tests. And what we tend to see, if you take all the data and do a meta-analysis of it, is that typically the period of what we would define as acute impairment takes place about 10 to 20 minutes after inhalation and lasts till about 30 to 40 minutes after inhalation. So what that means is during that about 20-minute window, subjects that consume cannabis, regardless of the performance task that is in front of them, it is most likely that they will make the most amount of errors in that 20 to 30-minute window. Then after about 60 minutes, we see that their error rate drops off significantly. In other words, they make far fewer errors during that period of time. And after about 2 to 3 hours, they tend to return to baseline, which means they tend to perform those tasks in the same manner that they did before they inhaled cannabis. And I think this is really one of the key points when we're talking about impairment in cannabis, is acknowledging that there can be some level of impairment, but it's a fairly narrow window of time that we're talking about. And I think this is really relevant when we're talking about the issue of cannabis and driving. Because if we're talking about a relatively short-lived window of impairment, then the responsible message is simply, if you're going to smoke marijuana, wait to drive until several hours afterward. Because the time of greatest risk of accident is really within this 20 to 30-minute window immediately after inhalation. So our message should be, do not inhale cannabis while driving. Don't smoke in the car. If you're going to smoke marijuana, wait. And by simply waiting about 2 hours, one can mitigate their risk of accident. But what we do see when we look at the data is that obviously not everybody does that. And that's why we see, again, if you take a meta-analysis, if you look at the overall data, we see an elevated risk of accident that is slightly lower than 2 associated with any use of cannabis. But we need to understand what that elevated risk means and put it in perspective, because many activities increase one's odds ratio of accident. In fact, the legal consumption of alcohol or alcohol consumption in legal amounts has a 4 to 8 times elevated risk. The use of prescription drugs in accordance with the way they're prescribed has an elevated risk of accidents that's about 3.5 times the risk of someone who's not taking prescription drugs. We know that texting while driving, according to NHTSA, increases one's risk of accident by 23 times. So marijuana's risk of accident is rather low when we compare it to these other behaviors. And that's why I say, as public policy advocates, we shouldn't be denying that there can be impairment. We shouldn't be denying that there can be risk, but we should be calling for public policies that are proportionate to the behavior with which we wish to discourage. We don't want people texting and driving, but we don't arrest people who text and drive. We give them a ticket, even though we recognize that the risk of that activity far outweighs any risk associated with marijuana and driving, for instance.
Yeah, well, penalties for cannabis have never been in proportion to any other infraction of regulation or law.
Yeah, I want to add one caveat and one little story. But, for some patients, when you're talking social cannabis use to be very responsible. And then for some of those patients who are literally using it medicinally, depending on their use, they need to use it. They need to have that in their system to perform okay. Again, whether it be people, with various spasticity problems, et cetera. So
sure, and let me say, Mary Lynn, that would be no different than with any other prescribed medication.
Exactly.
Some individuals might be on a much greater risk of accident on, say, opiates. But somebody who needs opiates to manage their pain arguably would be able to drive just fine on opiates. They would also become, just like we see with cannabis, tolerant. And while individuals seem to become tolerant to many of the cognitive effects of cannabis, we don't see that same level of tolerance associated with the therapeutic effects. So those individuals you're talking about, if they were to be performing the same battery of tests, arguably would perform better than the more cannabis-naive patient. That's an important point to bring up as well.
Right. And that's why I hope sometime down the road, if they want to look at impairment, it's look at behavior impairment. We all remember way back when the roadside sobriety test kind of thing. Can a person actually function, behind the wheel? And that is a serious issue. Now, the funny story I bring in, because as you're saying, that narrow window of time frame, there's still healthcare professionals out there who believe all this reefer madness. And I have the opportunity of discussing these issues with my colleagues who are addictions nurses. And I've got this PhD nurse down in Texas. I'll be good and not even mention the name. But at some point she wrote and she said something. She's got this illogical fear of marijuana. And she says, oh, heaven forbid when it becomes legal in Colorado, I'd hate to be on the road when somebody who used marijuana in the last 42 days is out there driving.
Yes, and as you know, there are states that have written their laws and have laws on the books that punish exactly that type of behavior.
Yeah, well, that's, again, I mean, I got to go back to ignorance. And these cops and these attorneys, in my mind, there's an expression in the military that goes something, if a guy screws up and he does it in public, the sergeant's going to look at him and go, hey, man, how to screw up on the parade ground. The parade ground is where you go out and everybody's watching you. Well, I don't know what these attorneys and cops think we're doing out here, but we are watching them. And we are watching them screw this up so badly. And then we're watching the medical community. And I'll leave the nurses out of this because the registered nurses of this country have led the charge for the therapeutic education of healthcare professionals. But again, the medical doctors are letting ignorant people make ignorant laws because they're ignorant themselves. And I'm frankly tired of living in a country where I got to be ruled by people that don't know as much as I do. And Paul, I really want to thank you again for your efforts over the years, and they have been efforts, to produce scholarly, well-researched, well-written journalism on this subject. And please tell the people how they can find some of that.
Sure. I would encourage people to go to the website of NORML, www.norml.org. We have a blog that is updated almost daily there. Much of my writings is available on that page. We also have several white papers that I authored there. And there's also a handbook that I put together many years ago and continue to update yearly called Emerging Clinical Applications for Cannabis that reviews about now 230 recent preclinical and clinical trials looking at the safety and efficacy of cannabinoids. And this was written as a primer to educate not just the patient, but also to educate their physician and to be a starting point so that the patient and physicians can begin to have these important conversations. I would also encourage people, they can write me directly. They can email me at Paul, the @ NORML.org, and I'd be happy to entertain any discussions by email about these subjects as well.
Well, Paul, it's always wonderful to have you as a guest on the big broadcast. You bring so much to the table when you join us, and I know our audience truly benefits from the knowledge that you share. Mary Lynn and Al, we've got another special guest on next Monday, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We have a brand new website. Need to check it out. It's like a little crop circle. You went to bed last night, looked outside, and saw your cornfield looked just fine. Woke up this morning and this beautiful art that was created by aliens. Wow, how'd that happen? And so we've got our website all done. And Mary Lynn and Al, if you haven't had a chance to check out your bio page and check out the host and archive pages, share the website with your friends. And when you do, please make it a point to let everybody know how important it is to take time for hemp.
Thank you very much for having us, Casper. We love this show.
Yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for help! Yeah!
Since 1990, over 9 million people have broken the rules and got arrested for pot. That's more than the population combined from Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, and even Vermont. Man, that sure seems like a lot. In 2005, over 750,000 American citizens got busted with weed. What burns holes in my tent is 86% were arrested for possession. But what I can't believe is one of those people was me. So what can we do about legalization but rally around and reform legislation that state our position and make it our mission? A change in the law is what we need. It's time we legalize weed. Chief Greenbud is spouting about prison overcrowding, using words like reform, rally, and change. Why should we do time for a victimless crime? Marijuana isn't evil, but it's taking the blame. Don't you think that it's time for a change? So what can we do about legalization but rally around and reform legislation that state our position and make it our mission? A change in the law is what we need. It's time we legalize weed. Let's make it our mission, state our position. Change in the law is what we need. It's time we legalize weed. Yeah, it's time we legalize weed.
Education and information. See what all the buzz is all about. It's time for hemp. It's time for hemp.